Prisoners of War by Charlie Rowan
and Tommy Reynolds. So basically a brief overview of what happened. As some of you may know, in 1941 was the bombings of Pearl Harbor, and this struck fear and kind of worry into many people across the U.S., especially on the West Coast because of its proximity to Hawaii. And they started making all these rumors and prejudiced assumptions about the Japanese Americans, because I think about 20 years ago, a lot of them moved to the West Coast for agricultural reasons to get jobs, and there were a lot of people living there, and the Americans started to fear that they could have ties with Japan and possibly be spies or try to sabotage the U.S.'s war effort. So the Americans on the West Coast in 1942, they pressured the Theodore Roosevelt into making Order 9066, which basically it made all the Japanese Americans sent away to internment camps across the U.S. in seven different states, and they were sent there for 3 years while the war was going on. And then about 40 years after the incident, a guy named Korematsu, who originally protested the internment camps, led a lawsuit against the government, and then ended up winning, and they got reimbursed.
Okay, so the camp life. So the Japanese Americans were moved to the west to undisclosed locations, and they were forced into like little rooms. This had a cot, a stove, one light bulb, and the camps included a mess hall, toilet and bathing areas, and a laundry and recreation hall. These camps were surrounded by barbed wire, and there were soldiers patrolling to make sure that no one would escape. And there were in-camp jobs that paid around $15 a month, and for food they were fed like potatoes and processed meat.
So which particular civil liberties were violated and how were they? So here are the amendments that were broken. The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unlawful search or seizure of property, and before they were interned, the FBI went to people's houses and stormed into them to see if they had Japanese culture or pictures or something. I read this one article about how a family they had to burn all their pictures and dolls and all of their cultural backgrounds so that the FBI wouldn't find anything. And then in the end, even though they didn't find anything, they were still sent. But anyway, the Fifth Amendment protects citizens from being stripped of their life, liberty, or property without a warrant from the court. And although it was a time of war and the government felt they had to make the means necessary to protect their country, they didn't give the Japanese Americans a right to court or to defend themselves at all. They were kind of sent away. The Sixth Amendment states that criminals have the right to a speedy trial. They had, like I said before, they had no defense against the government. They were kind of forced into this bubble. The Eighth Amendment protects people from unusual or cruel punishment, and this is very wrong, and it broke many of the, basically, it disagreed with the foundation which America was built on, which was letting people come and live here without being violated in any way. And the 14th Amendment gives people of all races equal treatment under law, and this was all prejudice. Basically, they kind of put all the Japanese Americans in a bubble just because of the color of their skin.
Alright, so was the U.S. government justified? So the reasons they thought to intern the Japanese Americans was because they were in a time of war, and they thought all Japanese Americans were spies, and they didn't want that to hurt the war efforts, and they had to do what was best for the country. Reasons against internment: they were wrong in their actions, and they basically ruined the lives of all the Japanese Americans forced into these camps, and they infringed the principles on what America was built on. And did it help? So in the camps, they actually didn't find any Japanese spies, so there was actually no point in doing it, and it ruined the lives of over 120,000 people.
Which option was prioritized more the needs of society or maintaining the rights of individual citizens? the needs of society were definitely prioritized more than the rights of the individual citizens. They felt their main reason was that, actually had two reasons. One was that it was during the time of war and they felt they had to make the means necessary, but they also said that they were crunched for time and only had like a certain amount of time to make these split decisions, so they kind of just went with like putting these people in internment camps.
So the impact on the American citizens. So the citizens actually supported this. As you can see, Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. They looked down on the Japanese Americans, and they thought like they were all bad because of what happened in Pearl Harbor, and they were really scared of what was going to happen. So at the time, they felt like they were doing the right thing by putting them in these internment camps. But after they saw what happened to them and what the camps were actually like, they realized it was wrong and cruel.
Alright, so Korematsu versus the United States, there were actually 4 court cases, but Korematsu was the main one that brought the government down. In 1988, Fred Korematsu and a couple other people basically sued the government for violating their personal rights, and the judges on a 6-3 vote agreed with him, and then the government gave back $20,000 to each of the living survivors and reimbursed them for their property losses. Like for example, if you owned a farm and you lost it because you had to go away to the internment camps, they gave you back money or land possibly for that, and then they also gave back a formal apology to all the Japanese Americans.
Alright, so we have a video.
I guess it.
It's still building up there.
Yeah, it's still on.
Do you feel like we need the video or?
Yeah, it's not really loading right now.
Sorry, just go
Yeah,
on to the next
that's
step.
probably good then.
Alright.
Yeah, so that's it.
That's it.
Alright.
Do you guys have any questions?
Was it only on the West Coast or all around the country that Japanese people were being put in internment camps? Like on the East Coast, would it happen?
It was mostly in the West because it was more open and they could do like random locations that no one would ever find.
So if people would Japanese try to escape this and move to the East Coast, or would?
I don't think anyone tried to escape.
Yeah, instead of trying to escape, they decided to stay loyal to the internment camps and kind of prove their loyalty to America. Because if they tried to escape or run away, then it would just hurt their chances of winning a lawsuit because it would look like they were trying to run away from the government.
And also just based on immigration patterns, if you're coming from the Pacific Rim area, it's closer to go to the West Coast. So you often hear about Ellis Island on the East Coast of New York City.
Yeah.
For immigrants to come over. In California, it's called Angel Island. Same thing, like it's an immigrant checkpoint, if you will.
Now, is this only directed towards Japanese, or it could also be directed to other Asians?
No, just the
Just
Japanese
Japanese.
Americans.
But that doesn't mean, I'm sure there were other people that were rounded up just based on look or
Yeah.
suspicion. But how can you guys? Oh, sorry.
I just had a question. Would there be any way for them to leave internment camps early, or?
Well, in 1945, all Japanese Americans with high enough citizenship were allowed to leave a year early, and then everyone else was released in 1946. So if you had a good relationship, or not good, but if you were proven as a good American, you could go home a year earlier. Chef.
How long were they in the camps for?
About 3 or 4 years.
And for the people who left early, they would only be
3.
2.
3
Well,
years.
3 years.
And then 4 years if you stayed till 1946.
Can you guys think of any contemporary examples or parallels between this type of reaction?
Yeah, I was actually talking to my dad about this last night, about the Muslim ban.
Sure.
About their president wanted to ban all Muslims from certain countries, and how there was no proof about this. He just didn't want, like, it was all prejudice. There was no actual proof about how you could bring, like, you can't just ban everyone from a certain culture because there have been a few incidents of, like, bombings or terrorist acts.
Sure. Sure. But on the flip side, what is the rationale for that?
That there could be some terrorists.
Could be, right?
You never know.
Did they actually find any people that were related to?
No, they didn't.
And we're talking
Yeah.
about, guys, we're talking about people who had been like second, third generation Japanese American citizens, people who weren't even born in Japan, right? Who were very Americanized, westernized, right? But just, it was a visceral knee-jerk reaction, which to them made sense at the time, but obviously they saw the fallout. And I think it would have been very different if, 15 people had been rounded up and they were plotting the next attack somewhere else, right? But it was, if you look at some of the camps, if you guys look into this deeper, you'll see some very eerie parallels between what the camps looked like there and what some of the Nazi prison camps and death camps looked like during the Holocaust.
So you might have already said this, but how many people total were rounded up and put in the camps?
Over 120,000.
And it's across like the southwest too, right? Like New Mexico and Arizona too.
Yeah,
Just
I think
vast land.
like
Yeah.
a lot of the West Coast.
Yeah.
Like most of that time zone.
Oh, my.
I just have one more question. Is there a stat on how many people died inside the camps?
I'm not sure.
There
a good
probably
question.
is. We don't know, and it probably wasn't that many because they weren't. I mean, like they were treated harshly, but they didn't like beat them or brand them.
But like, if you go like one, like can you
Yeah.
just go one slide back, or like one more, it says 60,000. There are only 60,000
Well,
living survivors.
Yeah.
That's
In
because
1980.
it's 19.
So it's like 40
Oh,
plus
it's
years
19.
after.
Yeah.
A lot of people just die of old age.
That's a long time to apologize,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, Fisco, did you have a question?
Oh no.
You're good. All right, good job, guys.
Thank you.